Fuel tax fury in France. Yellow vest protesters again vent their anger against President Emmanuel Macron. Will he bow to their demands or change his controversial policies? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. Emmanuel Macron was elected last year on presidential pledges to create more jobs and improve lives. But for many French people, his economic reforms are a disaster. Critics accuse him of being a president for the rich while hurting the poor. One of his reforms is causing particular outrage: fuel tax. Yellow vest protesters in Paris blocked roads for a second successive Saturday to tell Macron that they've had enough. And his environmentally friendly tax on diesel, aimed at cutting pollution, has to go, and so does he. Catherine Stansel reports.
A wave of yellow in the French capital, the anger fueled by a proposed tax rise. For the second successive weekend, the so-called yellow vests created roadblocks and organised protests demanding President Emmanuel Macron scrap the fuel tax. Riot police stopped thousands of demonstrators on the main avenue, the Champs-Élysées, from breaking through a cordon protecting the Élysée Palace, the president's official residence. And the protests continued into the night, with demonstrators setting barricades and cars on fire. The price of diesel has risen by 23% over the past year to about $1.71 per litre. Macron's decision to impose a further increase of 6.5 cents starting on the 1st of January is the final straw for many here.
The government takes everything from us. They steal from us. We have to pay for everything. We are overtaxed. We hope that the protests will change things.
The
rising cost of fuel is going to trigger a civil war. And I, like most other citizens, we are all ready. We are fed up with paying so much all the time. It's become the new normal. But paying so much is just not possible anymore.
The president blames rising oil prices worldwide and says the tax is necessary for more investment in green and renewable energy. Social media has primarily been used to mobilize the yellow vests. They say they have no leader or political affiliation. Police are concerned that far-right extremists may infiltrate the demonstrations and provoke violence. 3,000 officers have been mobilized in Paris. Nearly 300,000 people took part in similar nationwide protests last Saturday. 2 people were killed and hundreds of others injured. France already has some of the highest road fuel taxes in Europe. Macron's vowing to face down any protests and press ahead with his policy, no matter how unpopular. Catherine Stansel, Al Jazeera.
Well, Macron's 5-year economic reform plan includes reducing state spending by 60 billion euros so that France sticks to the EU's 3% of GDP deficit limit for governments, cutting 120,000 government jobs by not replacing civil servants as they retire, reducing company tax from 33% to 25% and changing wealth tax on property, introducing labour law reforms to cut unemployment, and reforming pensions by creating a new single system. Let's get the thoughts of our guests. Joining us today from Paris is Anne Giudicelli. She's the CEO and founder of Terrorisc. That's a consultancy firm focused on global risks and strategic intelligence. From St. Malo via Skype, Jacques Reland, a senior research fellow at the Global Policy Institute in London. Also in Paris, we've got Renaud Girard, chief foreign correspondent at Le Figaro, the daily newspaper. Renaud, let's start with you. These protesters, these yellow vests, don't have a leader. They're not unified under a political ideal or a union. Who are they? What do they want?
It's true, some come from the far left, some come from the far right. There are people who live, most of them, in the rural parts of France, and they need their car to go to work, to go to school for their children, to go to shop. And these people are disillusioned, disenchanted, disappointed, if you like, by globalization, by what we call in French mondialisation, because they are in regions, where unemployment is high, where factories have closed, and they feel that they are less well treated by President Macron than the what we call the bobo, the bourgeois bohème, the people, the middle classes of the cities, where the real estate is quite expensive in France, the centers of the city, and they need their car, and it happens that the diesel, and it's the most popular petrol in France, the price of the diesel, because of taxes, have been raised by 22% for the last 12 months. So they are fighting against that. It's quite important for them to pay, and diesel have been raised so much because it's now much more taxed than normal regular petrol, because as you know, it's much more polluting than regular petrol. So France wants to stick with its obligations with climate change and so on. And these people feel that they're not happy with the government, too many taxes, too many rules, and it's a kind of revolt, if you like, against the government. But the movement is getting down. It was the demonstrations were less big, less intense than last weekend.
Okay, we'll come back to that and the future of this movement in just a moment. But first, Anne Giudicelli in Paris. Is President Macron a president for the rich? Is the political class in France cut off from reality?
Well, I think that in what is going on now with these yellow vest people is the fact that they don't understand exactly to where he's going, first of all, because it's not really fully well explained. So there is a lack of pedagogical approach on that. Secondly, it's because at the beginning of Mr. Macron's election, he decided to cancel a taxation which was for the rich people, let's say. So that has been understood as a signal of he will be the president of the rich people. So that's a thing that has not been really addressed by the government, because there is so many measures that have been set up to compensate other taxations. So French people, especially middle class, because the point is the people who is protesting, in the street now, those groups, those demonstrators, there are most of them, they are on the middle class. That means those who cannot benefit from strong measures, social measures, and not rich enough to, let's say, find a way how to avoid some taxations, to be frank. So let's say that this population feel that they are, as it has been said previously, that they are not listened by the government. They are not taken into consideration in the global approach, governmental approach, and so they have to always pay. They have to pay always, but they don't know exactly for what and where the money is going. And they feel also that the ecological transition is just a pretext to take some money to fill the state budget. Okay. So it's one of the points.
Jacques Reland in Saint-Malo. The president seems determined to face down these protests. What's wrong with his policies? Is there any evidence to suggest that in the long term, they'll bring some form of benefit to the very people who are protesting right now?
Yeah, that's the point that Macron has been making since he's been taking office, that he has taken some reforms which will eventually pay off, bring more economic activity to France. For example, the big issue at the heart of the feeling that the French have that he is the president of the rich and that the society is becoming more unequal is the issue of abolishing the wealth tax and tax on and decreasing tax on capital gains. They are meant to be measures which could be good for investment in the French economy under the principle of the trickle-down principle. But people don't feel it yet. And now, in the meanwhile, they see that their purchasing power is going down all the time. Even though figures say that purchasing power is going up, people feel that it's going down with good reason. Because in France, wages have remained very low. The median wage, average wage in France is around 1,500 euros. And in the meanwhile, prices are increasing. Prices of commodities which are very important to people, such as the price of fuel, which affect their heating and their cars. More taxes on pensions, and pensions are not going up as fast as inflation. There's plenty of frustrations like that, which have been latent in France for quite a while. And it's this crisis has affected people more the lower middle class. It's not the very poor, because actually when we see the figures, we see that the very poor have benefited from many social measures which have been taken in the past 18 months.
Is this period of austerity then for the lower income and lower middle classes going to be worth it in the long run? Are President Macron's policies going to work in the long term?
It's very difficult to say. Up to now, there's been measures to try to improve the profits of the company. There's been cuts in social taxes, which in payroll taxes, which should allow people to earn more when they pay, because up to now, the French welfare system has been financed by wages, and the idea is to move the financing of the welfare system towards taxation through a tax known as CSG, which is a flat tax on all incomes. But up to now, people don't see the benefits yet. They just see the cost. And whether these measures, like for example, there's been before that some important measures, which have led to a lot of protest, the railway strikes, and on the labor legislation. There are measures which are meant to have a good impact. But the problem is also that the economic situation in the euro area is not improving. A year ago, things were going well. The price of oil was going down. The growth was quite high in Europe. And now we can see there's some kind of stagnation in Europe. The austerity policies which have been at play in most of Europe are having a detrimental impact on people. And we can see that all over Europe, a great dissatisfaction. We've seen great dissatisfaction in Italy. We've seen it in Britain, leading to Brexit. So the problem is a problem which can be felt at the European level of this, and people don't see an improvement in coming. Maybe it will come, but it depends on so many factors which are sometimes outside the control of the government.
Yeah, we'll come to those factors in just a moment, including the influence of the far right, not only in France but across Europe. But Renaud, a poll for your newspaper on Friday showed that 77% of people in France supported the protesters, thought that the protests were legitimate. What are we to make of that? Another poll suggested that his popularity rating has slipped to 26%. What does this mean for the president? Is he going to be a one-term president here? What does it mean for his party?
Of course, it's very bad for him to have only 26% of popularity, but we do not see in France, for the time being, any leader that would be more popular than he is. So he doesn't have, for the time being, a challenger. So it's quite an important thing. Number two, he said that he would, reform France. You have to know that, since the socialists came to power in 81, this country has not at all been managed, if you like, and we're just spending more and more and more, and we're the country that spends more. People criticize the abolition by Macron of wealth tax, but it's just a common sense decision because it's very simple. All the rich French were leaving France to pay taxes elsewhere in Europe, because in Europe there is no country who has got a wealth tax. So, in order to get these French investors and international investors back to France, Macron abolished this wealth tax, which, by the way, didn't bring so much money to the government. It's just a common sense decision. But there's this kind of, in France, this worship of equality, the revolutionary man, and they think that the government can do everything at once. Government cannot. So what Macron said recently, that he will not change his strategy, he will go on. You will see, I mean, in 3 years and a half, there will be presidential elections. If people feel that reforms have really been made and that the country is ready for a new start with him, they will not vote him out. They will keep him. But if, of course, you have like several changes, they will say, okay, this guy has not enough authority, and we will not keep him. But you have also to consider that Macron in the last 4 or 5 months made several big communication mistakes in various pictures. And I would say like demagogic selfies with even when the guy was getting out from jail and so on. So this has also this has a little bit destroyed his presidential image. But I think it's not over. I mean, I think that Macron can get back some popularity. You know, polls do not mean anything. You have to wait for elections.
Okay, and Giudicelli, to what extent, though, is all of this playing into the hands of the far right in France? What are the dangers here, particularly when it comes to next year's European elections?
Well, I mean, the government has focused a lot on the far right trends and political parties. But, I mean, they are not the only forces now in the political spectrum in France. So also the far right has been accused to be responsible of what happened in the Champs-Élysées and the violence and so on. So we have seen it was obvious that we had also far left wings involved in the violence. So let's say that there is no real opposition, strong opposition to President Macron. So I'm not sure that one of the slogans in the protest was to say that to vote to have a white vote has let's say a value politically. That means that it's a way how to say that to remind Macron that he has been elected thanks to only 23% of French people, because it was most of the people has voted Macron at the beginning just to counter Mrs. Le Pen, which is the far right political party. So let's say that still there is a chance to cool down the situation now, because if the government find a way how to to speak at the same, I mean, to show that he can take into consideration what is going on now, because it's obvious that this protest will not stop.
Okay.
I mean, the people has been pushed to do that.
Jacques, Macron presents himself as a president brought to power on the back of a grassroots movement, the man who could heal the rift between voters and their leaders, the man who could rebuild trust in democracy among those disillusioned with French politics. These protesters are much the same, though, aren't they? They're part of a grassroots movement here. They represent a spontaneous movement that goes beyond political differences at the moment. Are they a political threat to Macron?
It's not a political threat in the immediate future, I think, because Macron can survive. You know, President of the Republic in France, elected for 5 years. He has a strong majority in Parliament. He will be in power for the next 3.5 years. The point, will he be able to rescue the situation, to appear close to the preoccupations of the people? We'll see. We'll know far more after the reaction to his speech on Tuesday night. He intends to intervene. He will present his measures to try to improve the situation of the lower middle classes in France, and he will try to show that his plan towards his plan involving energy savings in order to prevent climate change will be explained more coherently than has been explained up to now, where people felt that it was just an excuse to raise taxes and to help the state meet its budget requirements. And this time he will also insist on the need to have talks with the intermediary goods. Up to now, he's been perceived as too much of a technocratic leader with not enough feeling for what's happening on the grassroots, especially in the provinces. And that's due to the fact that his party is a new party with lack of grassroots presence on the ground.
Jacques, Renaud, I need one very quick answer from you, because we're almost out of time here. Lacking as it does a unified leadership or a political umbrella, how long before this protest movement runs out of steam? Can people's anger, despite their disparate political views, sustain it in the long term?
I think that it's still. I think that now it's looking a little bit out of steam. I mean, I don't believe that it will last very long. People didn't like to see these images of barricades on the Champs-Élysées and burning of barricades on the Champs-Élysées. I think that maybe you will have other protests, because people like to protest in France. There's a kind of tradition. But I think that if Macron is able on Tuesday to show to the people that he has got a strategy on climate change, that he is raising diesel taxes, it's for good reasons, most of the country will, I think, understand him, and is really the legitimate leader. He has got no challenger in France. This is the reality.
Renaud, many thanks indeed. Thank you to you all, Anne Giudicelli, Jacques Reland and Renaud Girard. Thank you too for watching. Don't forget, you can see the programme at any time just by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian, Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.